Welcome to the Saskatchewan Soccer Association Competitive Stream Planning Process Member Engagement Number 3 webinar series. My name is Dave Nutt and I'm the Director of Soccer Operations for the Saskatchewan Soccer Association, and I'll be leading you through this presentation today. The focus on this presentation is on understanding the current state and primary issues within the competitive stream. During this presentation, we'll cover a brief introduction, present the current state and primary issues, which is essentially a summary of the information that was gathered from surveys and follow-up meetings with our member organizations as a part of member engagement number 2, a brief update on the engagement of the expert group, a review of the competition stream principles, as well as some initial discussion of the desired future state. During this presentation, the desired future state will be presented based on the information contained in the presentation. The webinars themselves did have some discussion from the member organizations that participated. And finally, a closing and information on the next workshop in the series. The competitive stream planning process was adapted from the Canadian Sport for Life Competition Review Workbook for Team Sports developed in 2012 and provides us with a framework for reviewing the competitive stream and competition structures within Saskatchewan. The process involves 5 steps. Firstly, identifying and defining the key components or principles as we call them now, which was completed in June with that information now available on the website. Step number 2 took place from July to September and involved analyzing the competition system and identifying the primary issues. Step 3, which will take place from October through November, will involve developing solutions and alternatives to overcome the primary issues and develop a better competition system. Step number 6, which will take place in December and January, is making a decision on the future direction within this stream. And finally, once that decision is made, it's important to continuously monitor and assess to ensure we are having success. The member engagement number 3 webinars is the final piece of step number 2, analyzing the competition system and identifying issues. This piece had 3 tools that were utilized to gather information. Firstly, the competitive structure information survey, followed by the competition scorecard, and then a follow-up meeting with the member organization to discuss their responses and determine whether they are well understood and the rationale for the responses that they provided. During this final piece, member engagement number 3, we'll look at feedback and consultation on the information that's presented, as well as the ability to ensure we're on the right track towards preparing our solutions and alternatives. This aspect of the engagement involved 4 webinars. In addition, this presentation will be posted online with information accepted and feedback and discussion until November 6th prior to completing step number 3 and moving on to step number 4. As a summary of member engagement number 2, there were 3 pieces associated with this aspect of the presentation. Firstly, the competitive structure information survey, about which 18 of 19 targeted member organizations and entities responded. Of those 18, 17 have now completed the competition scorecard, and of those 17, there have been follow-up meetings conducted with 14 of the 17, with 3 follow-up meetings still scheduled for completion during this phase of the presentation. To take a step back, target organizations were selected based on their recent participation within competitive stream programs, in particular the PSL and Premier or 8-a-side indoor provincials, but that pool was expanded to include those organizations that have the perceived potential to participate at that level in the near future. And in determining that, it was based on their participation numbers as well as the approach and the quality of their programming. Finally, another aspect of the feedback was the competitive stream information survey for non-target member organizations. This was a survey designed to allow those organizations that had not initially been targeted to provide their feedback and engage in the process so that they can have their voices heard. Not surprisingly, there were no responses to that information survey, which confirms our target organizations for the remainder of this discussion. The first aspect of the information gathering was the competitive structure information survey. The information gathered within this structure was used to better understand the current practices within the member organizations and entities in Saskatchewan. In addition, this survey was fairly simple, so it allows us to engage with our member organizations and build confidence in the process, as well as identifying the primary contacts for subsequent engagements in this process. Information gathered through the Competitive Structure Information Survey included information on outdoor and indoor programming, seasonal structures including start and end date, training including the volume and type both on and off the field, as well as the type and frequency of competition, and finally some information about program planning. Some key findings within the information that we received from the Competitive Structure Information Survey included a typical season length for outdoor soccer in Saskatchewan of mid-April to early May starting to late June or early July ending. Typically, those organizations that start a little bit earlier are those that have either artificial turf fields or indoor facilities, while those that wait on grass fields to be playable tend to start a little bit later in May. End dates of late June and early July for all organizations with the exception of those teams participating in the PSL, which now extends into early August. Some other key findings included league participation taking place only amongst PSL teams and those in Saskatoon and Regina and the surrounding area. For those teams that don't participate in one of those areas, their competition system is built exclusively on tournament-based competition. From the follow-up meetings with those organizations, it was agreed that a league-like structure would be preferred to tournament-based competition for a number of reasons. Firstly, it allows for full-length games. In some instances, players go entire years without playing a full 80 or 90-minute game based on abbreviated competition that takes place within tournaments. Additionally, a league-like structure allows for more improvement between games. In tournament play, the games are clustered close together, and recovery is the primary focus between games, which does not allow us a lot of time to improve and learn from the experience that we have in previous games. Finally, building a competitive structure around tournaments is also detrimental to the placement of winning within the importance of that structure. In order to continue to participate within tournaments, you need to win games, which can create an undue reliance on result rather than on development and performance. In addition, the information that we gathered found that 94% of respondents' teams have weekly training plans. Of those, 75% are linked to seasonal training plans. All of this is excellent as it tells us that the development of the player over the course of the season is considered when developing weekly training plans. There's a bit of a disconnect as we move into yearly training plans, which would be the linkages between multiple season training plans, as only 50% of respondents' teams build those linkages. In addition, only 25% of respondent teams provide non-soccer training sessions. These would be our sports science and medicine, strength and conditioning type of sessions primarily, with the rationale being that most organizations continue to be focused on the tactical and the technical aspects of play above those non-technical and tactical, and with a limited number of contacts available with athletes, the opportunity to be able to provide non-soccer training sessions is limited. Finally, as we look to our long-term player development principles, it's important to note that we train more than we play in all of our member organizations. From the responses that we receive, training ratios range from anywhere from just above 1-to-1 training to game all the way up to 4 training to 1 match, with most being in the 2 to 3-to-1 range. The next step in the information gathering process was the competition scorecard. The competition scorecard was a longer, more thoughtful process, which was designed to examine the primary issues based around the key principles of the competitive stream. It provided a more detailed assessment of each principle and broke them down into components. Individual numbers and responses are a lot less important, but it does allow us to examine and analyze trends. We haven't gone into any deep statistical analysis. However, information that we were able to obtain helps us to guide our thinking in understanding what the major concerns are based on the trends that we receive within this survey. Finally, we're also able to consider prioritization of various issues within our planning process. An issue could be a major concern, however, may not necessarily be a priority with much work needed to be done in order to rebuild this stream. When analyzing the survey, we ranked each component on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being strongly disagree, 2 disagree, 3 neutral, 4 agree, and 5 strongly agree. In some instances, where agreement is a negative, we adjusted the result accordingly. For example, agreement that cost is a major barrier to participation for many athletes would be considered as a negative, and as such, its score was adjusted to align to other scores where a agreement is positive. From there, each principal, component, and individual question was classified as being positive, which would be 75% or greater, neutral, which would be 60 to 74%, an area of concern, which would be 41 to 59%, and an area of major concern, which would be 20 to 40%. Again, we are simply looking for trends within the information that we received more so than the specific numbers in order to guide our future planning. When examining the big picture and ranking the principles amongst the results that we received from the competition scorecard, the trends were very clear. The principle promoting positive sporting values seems to be something that's going quite well within Saskatchewan. At the other end of the spectrum, the provision of a clear participant pathway and the management of barriers to participation proved to be our biggest challenges. Between that, our quality support and suitably structured, developmentally appropriate, and meaningful competition. While scores differed amongst the respondents, as one person's 4, maybe another's 1, the overall trend of those principles that scored higher and those that scored lower was fairly universal amongst all responses received. On its own, this doesn't tell us very much information, but as we dig a little bit deeper, we can start to think about the areas that are concerns and challenges and allow us to rebuild our system in order to overcome those challenges. When examining the scorecard, we do our best to break down some themes that are positive and some areas for development. In terms of positive themes, it's excellent to be able to say that the majority of cases, the LTPD principles are being implemented and adopted. We see that through appropriate training ratios, the provision of training groups, and modification of games to suit the developmental needs of individuals. In addition, the majority of our member organizations seem to feel that coaching is generally perceived as being of the good and necessary standard in order to support this stream of participation. Additionally, there are no concerns with equipment, and generally facilities provide the necessary support to this stream, with a few identified exceptions that have identified facilities as a major challenge for them. In addition, our environments tend to be inclusive, welcoming, respectful, fair, and ethical, which make up those positive sporting ideals which we pursue as a sport organization. Areas in development include a number of different items and are more extensive than those that are positively received. This was expected, as had we had very few areas of development, the need for this type of analysis and this type of work to rebuild this stream would not be necessary. There are many areas of development encompassing a number of issues, so some of these have been grouped together to create broader statements. So some of the areas of development that became clear from our competition scorecard include the alignment and cooperation within the system. So this is the requirement that our various streams, high performance, competitive, and recreational work together, as well as cooperation within our system. Our teams, clubs, member organizations, the province, as well as other stakeholders work together to support athlete development. It also became clear to us that competitive opportunities do exist for most individuals and teams. However, cost and travel are large barriers to accessing these opportunities. Additionally, athlete and team performance standards are generally not established, tracked, or analyzed, which creates a default position of having to rely on result as a means of measuring success. Also, the tracking and redistribution of athletes after the initial evaluation and placement is limited. Most of our member organizations tend to have some type of trial or tryout opportunity where players are grouped into teams. From there, athletes are not tracked and moved around based on their development over the course of a season nearly as often as might be required, as athletes do develop at different rates, and someone who at the initial trial period may not be of the caliber you're looking for a team could be within a few months, and alternatively, there may be athletes that don't develop as would have been anticipated and need to be reclassed. Finally, as presented earlier, session plans are not generally linked to seasonal, yearly, or long-term development plans. Every contact that we have with an individual athlete is an opportunity for us to progress towards a long-term goal. But in order to do so, it's important that our individual session plans link into the bigger picture of athlete development. In addition, there's very limited sports science, medicine, and technology support, which is something that we should be looking at within our competitive stream, at least as an introduction level. Competition formats and rules need improvement, as they tend to, rather than invite people into the stream, exclude them. It's important that our formats and rules are inclusive and provide young athletes with as much opportunity to access the competition stream as possible. If our rules prevent access rather than encouraging it, it's a challenge for us to be able to provide this opportunity to as many athletes as possible. In addition, we face challenges in balancing the individual needs and rewards with those of the team. We understand that individuals and teams both need to be recognized and rewarded within the competition structure. However, finding a balance that rewards the individual, recognizes his or her needs and developmental opportunities, but not at the expense of the team, is a difficult task for most involved. In addition, it became very clear that education is required on the stream and system, as well as the placement and importance of winning within this stream. Much work remains for people to understand where they fit within the system, how the streams align, and what opportunities exist within each given stream. In addition to working with our member organizations to establish a baseline and understanding of the current realities, as well as the major obstacles or barriers that we face when developing our competitive stream, we have also engaged an expert group to help us to think about best practices. Best practices is a difficult concept because it looks at some of positive principles, but we also need to consider environment. From our perspective, we'll scale this back and consider the principles within our own environment rather than determining a best practice that might work in another jurisdiction. To help us in that process, we've enlisted a group of well-renowned experts in the field in order to help us establish those principles. Each one of these experts brings a different piece to the puzzle, but taken together, it allows us to paint a very good picture of positive sporting principles, both across the country and internationally. Firstly, Sylvie Beliveau, who's a long-term player development manager with the Canadian Soccer Association, has been engaged to assist with principles from soccer competitions in other jurisdictions nationally or internationally. In addition, Carolyn Trono, who's the director of the LTAD for the Sport for Life Society, has been engaged, and she has been instrumental in developing both the framework for analysis of competition structures, as well as working with various sports nationally to build their sport competitions. So she brings with her tremendous expertise on principles from sport nationally, not just soccer. In addition, we engage with Warren Proctor, who's the manager of Sport for Life for SAS Sport Inc., who brings with him some expertise on the principles of sport competition that work well in Saskatchewan. As we would all acknowledge, Saskatchewan presents its own unique challenges and opportunities. Someone with Warren's expertise can help to guide us in what works well in other sports so that we might use some of those principles to better the soccer pathway. In addition, there's been engagement with Matt Greenwood, the manager of member services for the Ontario Soccer Association, who has been heavily involved with the development of league structures in Ontario, as well as Richard Way, the executive director of the Sport for Life Society, who is also the key liaison between LTAD and the Canadian Soccer Association when developing the Wellness to World Cup long-term player development document. By taking all of this information from all of these experts, we're able to paint a very clear picture on the positive principles that should be considered when we build our pathway. More information on the feedback that we've been able to obtain from these experts will be presented at the next webinar, but to kick us off, we wanted to provide a brief summary of some of the principles that are being considered and some of the information that's been presented from these individuals. Firstly, when we look at principles from soccer competition nationally and internationally, some important things to consider as we build our stream is the competition calendar being essential. The main question to consider here is what are all of the different competitions in which this group participates and how do they fit together? We need to recognize that within the competitive stream, athletes may be involved in multiple soccer programs or multiple sports. How this whole calendar fits together is an essential piece to ensuring opportunities exist and can be taken by individuals that would like to access it. In addition, it's important that we study the groupings of athletes carefully to ensure meaningful competition. Meaningful competition is the concept of having games that are relatively fairly contested with results being uncertain. It's fairly well expected and fairly well understood that competition against others of like ability is the best type in order to move us forward. We don't gain nearly as much by competing against athletes who are either significantly better than us or significantly less skilled. By competing in a matched environment, we're able to access the most meaningful of competition. When we look at meaningful competition, there are a few items to consider. Firstly, the players versus the team. While there are some individual players who may be ready to access a level of competition and make it meaningful, doesn't necessarily mean that all of their teammates might be. So how do we provide an opportunity where the individual athletes that may have the need to access that competition can, without necessarily bringing in full teams that make that competition less meaningful? In addition, it's important for us to consider the known versus the new, and within the new, the newly formed versus the new entry. And this is what we talk about in terms of teams. As we move down the process of rebuilding our competition structure, we would like to engage new organizations and entities and have them access our competitive stream. This would be the difference between those that have been involved in the past, who would be our known, and the new. That said, within the new, there are various types of groups. There can be a new entry versus a newly formed. A new entry would be an organization or a team that we know very little about. Newly formed would be individual athletes of whom we are aware and understand their level, but may not necessarily have played either as a group or under the same banner in the past. As such, we need to be able to consider when we place these athletes and entities, whether or not we're putting them in a position to be able to participate in meaningful competition. One idea of how we do that is a trial period before reclassification. So an opportunity for teams or individuals to try out the level of competition first, ensure they're ready before having to commit to the long-term competition process. These are the types of principles that we can lean on from other jurisdictions nationally and internationally in the soccer world to help us build a better pathway for Saskatchewan soccer. Another perspective that we've considered is principles from comparable sports in Saskatchewan, looking at team sports in particular and those with large registration numbers. Although there are lessons that can be learned, it's much less relevant to soccer to look at an individual sport or a sport with low registration numbers, as they're much more difficult to compare to our reality. If we look at basketball, one of the things that they've tried to do is establish a competition calendar that makes sense. High school basketball is a key aspect of the basketball pathway currently and takes place typically during the weeks. Basketball Saskatchewan understands that and builds their performance center as a skill development program that takes place on weekends so that athletes can participate in both. Volleyball has taken an approach of looking for clarification of roles and responsibilities. Club volleyball has been placed as the competitive pathway, and high school volleyball is more recreational. It allows those that are pursuing various types of participation to have a clear understanding of which avenue to pursue when they register. Baseball have focused in on providing supplemental training. They have groups of identified athletes who come together for skill development independent of what team they play on during competition. Those individual athletes are provided with extra support in order for them to pursue primarily NCAA opportunities, which in the baseball world filter into professional careers. There's significantly more work and information that our expert group can and will be able to provide moving forward. However, this paints a picture of the types of concepts that they're bringing to the table for us to consider, along with our soccer-specific information from our member organizations as we rebuild our competitive stream. Taking a step back to the launch point for our competitive stream planning, we'll revisit the competitive stream principles. The principles help to guide our thinking. If we successfully establish each principle, overall, the stream will be successful. These are considered as our foundational pieces around which we build the rest of our structures and ideas and framework in order to ensure success. The first principle is provision of a clear participant pathway. All participants have a clear understanding of the competitive stream participant pathway, including stream and program entry, transition and exit points, individual and team performance standards and opportunities, progression within the stream, and transition between streams. Essentially, each individual athlete should have the opportunity to understand how to access programs, how to move between them based on their location, based on their age, based on the opportunities available to them, their goals, and long and short-term interests. In addition, we need to be able to provide quality support to our participants. Quality support involves all of the non-competition aspects of sport development, including participants having access to the necessary resources to support the achievement of their soccer goals within the competitive stream, including coaching, training opportunities, officiating, sports medicine and science, technology, sport administration and management, facilities, and equipment. Grouped together, all of these supports allow the athlete to be able to fulfill their potential when we combine it with competition. Speaking of competition, the next principle is suitably structured, developmentally appropriate, and meaningful competition. What is meant here is that competition is appropriately structured and modified to align with the developmental needs of the participants and leads to results that are not predictable and relatively close, reinforcing the belief amongst participants that they have a chance to succeed. There are three separate principles here, the first being that it is suitably structured. What we look at there is the actual structure of the competition. When does it begin? When does it end? Who participates? How often? And all of those types of things. Developmentally appropriate speaks to matching the competition structure and the rules of the competition with the developmental needs of the participants. Is the facility and equipment the appropriate size? Are we playing the right length of time? And those types of things that help us to align the needs of the participants with the structure. And finally, as we've talked about previously, we'd like meaningful competition, the idea that every participant feels as though they have the opportunity to succeed when they begin a game. There's no one walking into the game feeling as though it is already won or is already lost, which provides much less meaningful opportunity to compete. The next principle is the promotion of positive sporting values. These are the soft skills that are gained through sport participation and essential to building long-term quality people, which is an essential aspect of sport participation. What we mean here is that the lives of participants are enriched by fostering a safe and positive competitive environment which creates a sense of belonging focused on fun, respect, inclusion, and fair and ethical participation. And finally, we need our competitive stream to manage barriers to participation. Participants and stakeholders are educated about and understand the competitive stream, which supports accessible opportunities for any participant with the necessary commitment and desire through the management of barriers to participation. We would like all of our programs and opportunities to be accessible to those that would like to access them. In order to do so, we need to manage the many barriers of participation. In particular, when we look at our competitive stream, we're analyzing cost and travel as our primary barriers. When taken together, if we are able to achieve all of these principles and align our programming, services, and opportunities within the competitive stream, we will be successful in providing opportunities that appeal to more participants and engage them in our competitive stream. The desired future state is the place where we would like to be moving forward that achieves our principles, recognizes the information that we've received from our members which help us to guide our primary issues as well as our priorities for the future. Using all of the information that has been gathered on the current state and the primary issues and building around the principles, what does the desired future state look like? Based on the information that we've been able to gather and analyze, some of the important principles that we're considering at the moment from a 10,000-foot view are as follows. Noting that this is a work in progress and will present more specifics at the next webinar in terms of where we're headed within the desired future state, as well as subsequent webinars as we confirm this direction. So firstly, we would look to have a clear pathway with alignment and a coordinated calendar. Drilling down within that, we'd also like our session plans linked to our seasonal, yearly, and long-term plans. So we would like all of the components of our sporting structure to work together amongst the various stakeholders, member organizations for the good of the athlete. Every athlete in Saskatchewan should have a clear understanding of the pathway to achieve their desired future goal. In addition, there is agreement that a league-like competitive structure is the preference over tournament-based competition. Within that league-like structure, there is a need to be able to provide individual and team participation opportunities, performance standards and rewards, meaningful competition, reduce the cost and travel as barriers to participation, focused on fun, because without fun, the ability to maintain athlete participation long-term is limited. We need to consider more inclusive rules, sports science, medicine and technology support, coach training and development opportunities, as well as referee and training development opportunities in order to support providing quality opportunities for our athletes to participate. The challenge faced now is finding programs and services that create this desired future state. It's a difficult process and will take time, and we look to our member organizations to provide their feedback and ideas in order to help us to frame that desired future state, and when the time is right, populate that with the appropriate programs and services to ensure we achieve it. Member organizations who participated in one of the series of webinars had an opportunity to discuss the presented information on the desired future state in order to be able to provide feedback in the moment. In addition, with this presentation now posted online, there is an opportunity to engage in further feedback up to Friday, November the 6th. In order to do so, please contact Dave Nutt, Director of Soccer Operations of the Saskatchewan Soccer Association, either by email or by phone, and I will be more than happy to hear your thoughts about the desired future state or any of the information contained within this presentation. That concludes the information that's presented as a part of member engagement number 3, but that's not the last opportunity for us to continue our discussion. The next round of webinars will take place between November 16th and 20th, following a similar format to these current presentations, offered 4 times at 60 minutes each, where we will discuss framing the desired future state and a continuation of an idea exchange in order to determine the direction that we will head. From there, we'll get together again as we pare down the number of opportunities to 2 so that more voices can be in the same room at the same time as we look to confirm the desired future state between December 7th and 11th. The goal to have a framework for the competitive stream complete is by January 2015, with a full competitive stream plan able to be presented by March 2015. As March 2015 would challenge our timelines in order to, my apologies, that should be January 2016 and March 2016. In order for us to implement those plans, it does challenge our timeline for Outdoor 2016, as it does not give our member organizations very much time to prepare. As such, we would consider Indoor 2016 and Outdoor 2017 for our implementation, which would give us nearly a year and a half to be able to work together towards the implementation before our outdoor start point. That said, these timelines are in place to guide us, but we will not be rushed. We need to get this right. It's far more important for us to be able to create a framework and a series of programs and services of which everyone would like to be a part and feels as though they've contributed to than it is to hit these timelines. We look forward to working with you on that process and hearing your feedback, understanding it, and using it to help us build the desired future state and to improve the competitive stream process within Saskatchewan. On behalf of the Saskatchewan Soccer Association, I'd like to take this time to thank you for hearing this presentation and for your feedback. My contact information is posted on this slide. Please feel free to give me a call or send me an email if there's information that you'd like to provide as feedback on either this presentation or information that you feel would be valuable for our consideration as we build the desired future state. Thank you very much once again for your time, and I look forward to future engagements with you.